Welcome to everyone to this much anticipated session with Mr. Sanjeev Krishan. Before we start the session, I'll quickly introduce Sanjeev. He's as you can already see, Chairperson PwC India. And in addition to Sanjeev, I would also like to welcome his team, Sam Mahapatra. Who leads the ESG practice or the ESG division at PwC. I would also like to welcome Joseph Martin, who is also part of the team, um, and Miss Moshmi Haldar. So, welcome to everyone, and without much delay, we'll start.
So I think it only goes to show that the question should all be directed towards them, not to me. But
Thanks a lot, sir, for joining us today. So to start off the session, maybe a lot of us know ESG.
If you give me one more moment, uh, thank you so much. We have the endowment team, Ms. Chavi here. The endowment team has made this collaboration happen. You know, behind the scene, all that hard work happened. Would you like to give a short introduction? Mike is right over there. Yeah.
But this one's working. Thank you. So I think many of you know the work of the endowment, and you always know that we try to bring meaningful partnerships with industry collaborators. We've done something with MICA recently, and now we are extremely delighted that we have PwC in the house. You all know the name well, but what you may not know perhaps as well is the focus that they have developed in the field of ESG over the last many years, and it's a top priority for PwC globally. There's a forum of between IIMA and PwC, and that will largely be anchored by the Arun Duggal Centre, which you know Professor Anish and Professor are part of. And we had done a launch of that through Arun Duggal, who's our donor last year as well. But the centre will work very closely with PwC team in terms of the collaboration on this forum. And the aspiration is that we develop a think tank in which we can have multiple ESG conversations with stakeholders like industry, public policy makers, etc. So we are extremely delighted that we could make this happen, and thank you for showing up. And hopefully, sustainability is something which is a very important theme, and I hope there's increasing awareness amongst that in you. And please take this opportunity to imbibe something which you also communicate within your friend circles, etc. I think the next generation is the hope in this. So I hope you take away something meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chavi. Um, once again, thank you so much, Sanjeev, for making this happen. Endowment team for making this happen. When we were brainstorming, how the interaction should be, right? We have Sanjeev here. What should be the format, right? We thought like we could go out the traditional way. We can have sort of a couple of profs standing here and having a conversation with Sanjeev, and the takeaways would be sort of for you guys to through diffusion process take away home. But then we thought, why not just flip the format, right? Because though we sit here and pontificate and sort of we talk about why this is important. What about the real politic of sustainability? What are the real issues which you as a student, you as a employee or as an employer, as a startup, you have faced? And why not have that practical, real conversation, right? And that was the idea. And then we thought, what best way to do it rather than bring our brilliant students, and we'll try to put Sanjeev on the spot, right? We will be here, of course, to moderate our students if they go sort of, over enthusiastic. So our role, as I said, is going to be on the sidelines. We both are sitting over here. Professor Abhiman is also here, who is also an executive committee member of the ESG. And Abhiman, please do, he's also by the way, he's also, the PGP chair. So in case of over enthusiasm, he knows how to. He can.
All the heavy hitters are here.
Yes, yes. Right. So without much ado, on your behalf, you have three representatives. You are already in PwC. Yes. We already have a
Hopefully he'll be
offer
nicer.
from PwC
He'll-
2 weeks back, right? So I hope it's not a conflict of interest. Now you have to now ask the toughest question. All right. So over to you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like many of us did mention here that usually what we associate ESG, which is environment, social, and governance standards, we usually associate it only with the E, which is the environment, sustainability, and those concepts. But I wanted to know your thoughts on like the other two components, which are equally important, which is like the social and the governance dimension. So, if you could speak a bit about what firms should be doing in these areas, I think that would be a good start.
Yeah. So let me just narrate an incident. This was way back. I think it was early 2000s. So I used to lead the transactions team at PwC, and we had. Um, so one of our leaders was actually an alum of Ahmedabad, Bharti Gupta Rumula. She was she was leading the transactions business at that point in time, and she was encouraging me to actually get a lot more diversity, gender diversity, and we did manage to make the transactions practice quite diverse. But the transactions practice, uh, in my stereotypical mind, etc. I'm saying this. It was hard business, and we lost a lot of our women employees, mid-career, right? And all of a sudden, Bharti came and asked me one day that, okay, why is it that you have lost all your women employees, and what are you doing to get them back? And I was made to think that, okay, they've left us, as anybody might do mid-career, because they have other pressing challenges to meet, personally and otherwise, and I'm not doing anything at all to get them back to work. And that to me was my first brush with the broader S agenda. Uh, the first time that I thought about it. And when you think about the S agenda, and in fact, I was just saying that that is one part of the ESG narrative which we think the least about. I'm putting it in terms of gender balance. And of course, just to complete that story, we did a lot to get those women employees back to work. Even we started part time with them, and at least 4 of them joined us back from the 7 that I'd hired. And I thought that was victory that we got 4 of the 7 back. But that was the first time that I started thinking about it. A few years later, we were having a conversation with a glass manufacturing business in Pune, who had a lot of contract labor, and there were a lot of issues which came up, in the contractual, with the contractual labor relationships that they had, etc., in terms of the way they were being treated and so on and so forth, etc. Um, and we, of course, we were working for a multinational client then, and when we were presenting our findings to them, when we mentioned to them that, okay, this is the component of contract laborers that they had in the total workforce, and this is how they got treated, they just clamped down on the transaction. They said, we're not, no point, we're not even discussing any further. That was my second brush with the S. The third brush with the S was much later on. I did not used to do a lot of developmental work, but there was a global retailer for whom we were doing some work in terms of, uh, again, because the private equity guys had got very interested, and when I was chasing one of them, this was somebody in Panipat, and I went to meet them. And he said that my business is XYZ, etc., etc., but I just lost a contract with this global retailer. So I asked, why did you lose a contract with this global retailer? And he said, he gave me some story. So obviously that was such a key contract for him that if I have to represent him in front of the private equity guy, I had to find out as to why he lost that business, right? And later on, as I realized, he lost that business because that global retailer found out that, and I'm not kidding about this number, 77% of his workforce were underage people, and that's why they took away the contract. That to me was my third brush with the S. Now, to me, those three, and there are, of course, there could be many other manifestations of the S. I think that describes the S to you. I mean, there could be many other manifestations. As far as the governance piece is concerned, governance has been pivotal to. Um, I mean, it is, and when we talk about, when we in our parlance talks about trust, governance has to be the bedrock of trust. But coming from the industry that I've worked for the longest period, you would have seen a lot of corporate scandals, challenges, so on and so forth, etc. And the one that we were thankfully not involved in, but yeah, many of you might remember, there was a business in largely headquartered out of Delhi called Lilliput, which used to do kids' clothing. And two of the largest private equity houses of the day, TPG and Bain, were invested in it. And we were not involved in that particular transaction. But I mean, if you read up about that particular trade, that was one of the very evident failures of governance that happened, in spite of having a board which was whatever, and so on and so forth, and so much so that after that, for the longest time, private equity investors stopped investing in retail businesses for a very, very long time, and the confidence did not come back. Uh, that was a very evident brush with the G. And I think these examples really stand out for me when I talk about the S and the G, because I can sit in front of you and talk about the S and the G in glowing English, but to me I think it is a manifestation of those E's, the S and the G, which actually are important, because that is how you bring them to life. And the mitigation of some of these, I think, is extremely, extremely important, possibly even more so than the E that we understand very, very well. I must say that E also we understand loosely, and I'm talking about layman, not people in the room. A layman will understand only about the E when they get to hear that two of the games in Australia getting rained off in November. That okay, how can Australia be raining in November? It's supposed to be warm, and that's when it hits you that climate change is really impacting everything. But I think the S and the G are less well understood, and the examples that I gave you are the ones which I think need to be mainstreamed, and we need to be able to respond to some of those on an ongoing basis. So to me, E well understood, S and G possibly not so, as you said very rightly, but we have to just look all around us to see how the S and G, if I may use the word, are possibly are even bigger challenges than the E.
Thank you, sir, for explaining this very well. Like, we know many organizations are just concerned about environment part, but it is commendable to see like PwC is doing much more for the S&G part also, social and governance. And we also came to know like they are focused more towards the D&I, diversity and inclusion also, in ESG domain. That's appreciable. So I have a second question. I'm just pivoting now. So as per the recent mandate for this from this financial year 22-23, ESG auditing reporting is being made mandatory activity. So in the long run, how a paradigm shift could be possible, like from in which a firms could take this activity as a voluntary practice instead of being a mandatory obligation.
So this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, whatever is mandated, eventually becomes a tick in the box, right? Because whatever is mandated, effectively, somebody is putting a gun on my head, and when a gun on the head is put on my head, I obviously act to save my life. So currently it is to save the life, so as to speak. I think the moment for truth for us is now, whether we want to treat it like that, or whether we think that this could be a value enabler, value creator, etc., with whatever words you want to use. And I think, as more and more, like if we go back to the example that I gave you, right, that global retailer stopped working with this particular manufacturer because he stopped buying from him because he felt that you're not S compliant, right? Now, when one does it, it is only one thing. When all of them start doing it, when all the buyers start saying that, okay, I will not buy from you if you are using child labor, and this is child abuse. Now everybody needs to act in a particular manner for this to become mainstream. And I think that is what we possibly need. See, as far as the reporting part is concerned, as I said, mandatory things is just the starting point. Hopefully it gets the attention to people that, as I start embracing it, even as a tick in the box, what is the benefit that it is causing me? Because as I was just saying, that unfortunately the adoption of some of these things is not 70-30, it's not 80-20, it is still 95-5. Voluntary adoption on some of these things is only 595, because if you look at the requirement is only for the top 1,000 companies, right? It is not for every company at the moment. So I think this is, but this will actually force businesses to start thinking about it. If the largest companies start thinking about it, then they will make sure that the supply chain, the distribution chain also is aligned, because if they have to report back, they don't have to report back only about them, but they have to report back about their entire ecosystem. And as they do that, I will be forced, if I want to be relevant to them, I will then have to change my practices. So this is a starting point. Hopefully this will mainstream it, but this will not be the only thing.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a transitionary point, I must say, and this is how the following processes will work. But, so, sir, what has been PwC's main clear specific vision when it comes to ESG space in India? Because the global strategy and Indian strategy might not be as similar as you would have thought initially. So, encompassing the diversity that India has presently and its global condition, how do you think it's different from the global strategy?
So see, I think something on something like the ESG, I think the way to deliver it, the pace at which we may deliver it may be different. I don't think that it's very different globally. In fact, globally we have centers of excellence on ESG at multiple places. I mean, the amount of hiring that we have done on the ESG side over the last 3 years in particular. I mean, I was at the Middle East Partner Conference some time back, and they've hired some people who have been doing deep climate work for many years, etc. And the idea is not even to sell any business. The idea is simply to be thought leaders and make those conversations, as Sam was saying in another conversation just now, that how can I first get internal adoption? Unless each of my 21,000 people are able to talk, because I need ambassadors. What do I need? I need ambassadors, right? Unless each of my 21,000 people first become ambassadors of this, how will I say that I've made a difference? So to me, I think it could be the fact that some businesses, maybe some geographies may be more developed. I think the Paris Agreement did allow for every country to sort of set their own pace. Uh, Obviously, the dynamics of the developed world and the developing world, etc. There is also need for greater financing, etc., that has to be provided by the developed world. So all that is there, but I'm keeping all that aside. I'm just saying that the level of maturity and the level of need that every country has is different. The first one really is to make it mainstream, to sort of have this coming up in each and every conversation that we are able to do. Whatever your target could be 2027, your target could be 2032, your target could be 2070, whatever your target could be. But the fact that you are bringing it out in every conversation, because every matrix that you look at will say that we are behind. We as a society are behind on every measurable matrix at this point in time. Yes, there could be certain companies, certain corporations which may be a bit ahead of time, but as a society, we are behind on each one of those matrices. So, from my standpoint, the need could be different because of the stage of maturity. I mean, look at some of the global indices themselves, and they'll tell you that who is emitting the maximum amount of carbon, right? US is still the worst culprit, almost 25%. We are much lower in that ranking. And then you look at what is it that considering your ecosystem you can do better. So for instance, I mean, I'm just giving one example and then I'll pause. uh, we have to figure out what is it, where is the biggest focus at. For instance, if circularity is one thing where there can be greater focus and there could be the greatest return on your focus, because people are saying that, okay, if circularity we focus, the carbon emissions could be down by 44% by 2050. Now, maybe India wants to focus on circularity while somebody else focus on something else. So I think the way we deliver it could be different. The path that each one of my one may take may be different, but the fact that it is a global focus is just the way it is.
Just
On a related note, since he brought out this distinguishing between India and foreign contexts and all these things, feel free to not answer my question if you feel you're not comfortable. But are we sort of, do we need to distinguish between enforceability of prevailing laws and broader ESG issues in India? Because to me, the reason we are not compliant is because we don't enforce existing child labor laws or EPA laws or emission laws. So before we think about ESG, do we need to sort of address this enforcement issue? Because when we think about our governance structures, they are one of the best in the world. It's just that enforceability is a big issue. Legal liability regimes are extremely weak. So would that be a major stumbling block before we get into the broader aspects of regulations or law and beyond when it comes to ESG?
I think the question that is in front of us is that what do you do with a crying child, right? I mean, do you pacify him, or do you indeed scold him? I think that's the question that we have to ask ourselves. I think the laws, etc., are there. I mean, you look at, forget everything else. You look at the pollution control board requirements. As a diligence person, I've been looking at it forever, and everybody has that certificate that you want from the pollution control board. Now, you know, that certificate is there, so requirements are met.
Whether the cameras are on or not is an issue.
So that's a big question, right? So the question is that you might come up with 20 regulations, and then somebody will say, as we just heard, that by doing so much regulation, we could actually create. And I completely agree with that statement that got made just now, that there could be regulatory cholesterol. In fact, I attended a session, I remember, with Business Today, which was just about regulatory cholesterol, because they actually come up with so many things. I think the idea would be to make it a little bit more, you know. When you cut the supply lines, because by saying that, okay, I'm going to regulate you more, it is only going to have that much of an impact. We have seen that, is my view. If I know that I will get less working population, I'll not be able to have access to talent, I'll not have access to capital, I'll not have access to input. If each of those three will be less available or will be available more expensive to me, that would be, to my mind, a better approach. It requires certain amount of enablement for us to be able to do so. I mean, some people just tell me, and I'm being very candid in this room. Some people say, "Arey, we will do ESG when US gives us the amount of money that we are asking them." Right? It is like it reminds me of the dialogue in Diwar. I'm sure many of you might have seen that movie, but many of you may not have. Right? So it is the way it is, right? But to me, I think when you actually make it almost transactional, then it works. I've seen it work less, is the way I put it. I'd put it.
All right. So we can say that implementing regulation is not a long-term solution in a way. We have to build change like inside the organization, and then they can do so. So I just want to go to our previous discussion. We were talking about the climate change and the milestone. So as per COP26, India is targeting carbon zero by 2070, but many countries in America or Europe are targeting by 2040 or so. So how PwC India work with PwC global team to achieve the same objective but in different milestone, like in which harmony they work or how they achieve the objective.
So see, I think a lot of those. Let me just start by saying, to the answer to the first question, that many of those aspirations were set out before the war erupted. Now, whether they are still holding it, if they are, I mean, kudos to them, and I hope they achieve their objectives. But the jury is out on that. See, as far as we are concerned, I mean, we look at something like this, which we incubate as a global focus. So like Sam has his counterpart globally, and he works with that team globally, because there is some amount of learning that we have from their starting positions, etc. And as well as, at times, and it has been proven on multiple occasions, that at times countries like us, we are able to take a bit of a quantum jump because of the way we are approaching a particular problem. So it is always about doing things together, right? In some ways, there has to be, we talk about skilling, upskilling, learning, and all that stuff. So that is all combined things. There are global universities that Sam and his team would go to, ESG universities, etc. So I think that while it is not one workforce, because we are all different territories in that sense, and we are all Indian. Like, this is an Indian partnership, so we're all local partnerships. But the back end for us is common. The resource pool is all common in some ways, etc. The input resource pool is all common. So then it is about question of, okay, what is the local need in every particular geography. The other thing is that most of our clients are actually connected. So if you look at let's say a Cadbury, right? If Cadbury has operations in India, and if they've given a commitment in the US, From India's standpoint, they might do it, they might have the ability to do it in 2045, but because they have a global commitment, they would want it to be done by 2030 or 2025. So, those actually are the ones which actually help us, because when you work with and I'm just taking names to make it more relatable, that when you work with a Cadbury and help them achieve some of their goals by 2025, let's say, and you can always, this is the experience that we gain as an organization tomorrow. And this is how firms like ours work any which way. The learning that you have from a Cadbury engagement who have an expeditious need, you can then go and talk to Dabur about it and say that, okay, hey, Mr. Burman, why don't you do something that you are aspiring to by 2032, by 2027, because that may be value creator for you. So I think it's that, and actually that's the benefit of a global organization.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so my question would mostly be drawing on the the comments that you had previously. So on one side, you have companies who kind of look at this exercise as kind of like a tick in the box in some sense, and then you have like consumers who, like, even if I read the Cadbury packet which says sustainably grown cocoa, I mean, there's no way that I can believe them with just that stamp or that mark. So a lot of consumers might just look at it as like a greenwashing exercise, like because they're allowed to say that, they get to say that. And yeah, because there are a lot of firms like yours which are at the back, kind of advising or helping companies with ESG as a whole. What do you think is like the main challenge or like the biggest challenge that you see for companies? And like, how are there like instances where they've actually derived like that value creation that you spoke about? Are there actual instances of value creation, like far from like just like a reporting aspect of issuing a report that says, yeah, you're ESG compliant? So could you like speak about some
See, I
instances
think
like
there are two very different topics. See, greenwashing is, I mean, okay, I, I would just say that greenwashing is um, is all pervasive. Simply put, when you say that a trash bag is reusable, I mean, trash bag, reusable. I mean, those two words. I mean, I don't know what to make out of it, right? If you say that, okay, you see certain cans or whatever that I'm using 50% less sustainable, more sustainable material, right? Now that is going up from 1% to 1.5%, and that is so you're saying 50%, but your starting base is only 1%, right? You have made it 1.5%. So unfortunately, greenwashing is, well, I mean, I think there is definite work to be done. Let's just put it out that way, that there is more work to be done on greenwashing, etc. And I think that's the more there is focus on this, there will always be people who will find ways and means of navigating the system in the way they are used to doing business, etc. I think one is to me, I think on the greenwashing side, and I know I'll come back to the second part of the question. I think it is about creating that awareness, right? Now, if I were to say, of course, you can't do that on a trash bag because where is the place and whatever else, etc. But if you were to say that, okay, what is the component itself in the 1 to 1.5% example that I gave, that if I were to say what are the, if I provide more information, if there is awareness in me as a user that, okay, this is how I should read the information, because honestly at times I as a user also don't focus on it. And then when somebody says that there is greenwashing, etc., I also become militant and say, oh, greenwashing is not good. But am I making the effort myself? Am I an aware consumer? And are there enough groups which are making me aware? So I think it's going to be a combination of that, because greenwashing. I mean, we are talking about regulation of ESG standards more globally. I mean, regulating greenwashing is, while there are a number of now organizations, etc., which actually audit the whole piece on greenwashing, and there is some deep work that they do. It is not at scale at the moment. So that's my first observation. I think on the second part, I think, as far as you broader, I thought the second question was a broader ESG standards, right?
like the actual value creation that you might have seen for companies
Yeah,
on the ESG side, like actually taking up an initiative for the environment which has actually benefited their company,
yeah,
so that more people are more inclined to take up this entire exercise of focusing on like environment, social and governance
yeah.
aspects.
So I think, see, there is no immediate gratification on some of these areas. In fact, there could be near-term cost which may be there. I mean, if you want to green your business, there may be some short-term costs which might actually reduce your PBT by a few percentage points, for all I know, rather than increasing it. Over a long-term period of time, and you guys know this better than ever. Even on a present value of money basis, I'm sure people on more sustainable basis will have greater value of cash flows, and then it's a question of how you're traded and everything else. But there could be some short-term costs, if I may. See, the way it gets the see, unfortunately or unfortunately, when you talk about value, you can look at it from two angles. One is that I have done, let's say I'm a steel plant or a cement plant. Cement plant, as you know, is one of the most polluting sectors. Um, Steel, I mean, there are a lot of funds at this point in time who actually would say that, okay, I will come and decarbonize your plant. I do not want to take ownership of your, at the corporate level, steel or power plant, but there are a lot of funds, including in India, who would actually come and say that, okay, I will provide finance for you to decarbonize your plant. And that is a very obvious shift that can be made. The only other way, unfortunately, that you can, immediately make a correlation is through market cap of listed businesses, or at least when there is a monetization even comes on for unlisted businesses. Unfortunately, they are not like startups which get revalued every 3 months because of new funding rounds, but that's a separate story. But and there, if you look at it, it's hard for me to say whether genuinely ESG compliant businesses have done better. But if you look at just the BSE Sensex, the BSE Sensex, the last time that I read it, which was I think in May this year, when we did this analysis, I think ESG compliant businesses were 11 to 17% higher on their respective market cap, 11 to 7% higher market cap than their respective competitors who were less on the ESG index. So yes, I mean, it would appear that the market is valuing them more, because maybe the how much retail money is that? Most of it is institutional buyers, right? Maybe because the institutional buyers who are supposed to buy that stock, have been told that you should buy, more ESG friendly stocks. But then, that's fine. I mean, that's how the push will come.
So, sir, as students, one of our key interests are the career opportunities that we could have relating to ESG coming up in the in present and in the future opportunities. So, what do you think are some of the major career doors that especially business school students can see coming up in time?
Well, I mean, it's actually across the board, and maybe Sam is better placed to answer that question as to where all he intends to hire people, but whether it is from reporting, which is one part of it. I would say that the biggest part of it, it is to say that how can starting point is how can we create those discussions with our clients. How can we think about something that, let's say, this whole group has not thought about it, right? Because one is we need people who will do more regular conversations and say that, okay, get get net zero on water and plastic and so on and so forth, etc., etc. Those are fine. I think those are more established. As I was saying, that it could simply be that, what is it that we could do with dovetailing, let's say, the impact of climate on various parts of the country and insurance premiums, for instance. Can somebody help us do that, etc. So can people, because see, today people are talking about transformation or value, not sustainability by itself is one thing. Transformation by itself is one thing, but can you actually do the intersection of it? And that's where I think the biggest opportunity lies at this point in time. We would need people who are deep climate experts, or who understand the impact of climate change on businesses. And it could be a process of the business. It may not be at the top level also. It could simply be that you are looking at people who will actually deliver on the social aspects of it. I mean, we have a very large social business which works both with governments and with some of our multinational clients, etc. It could be in that segment. It could be on the education side as well. Again, we have a large education team which actually focuses on the ESG element. And then, of course, on the governance side, where we work not only with corporations but with industry bodies like, for instance, the CI and others, etc., on governance matters and processes, and so on and so forth. So it is just across the board at this point in time. The most deeply valued, if I may call it so, is going to be to enable some out of box thinking, work with our think tank, work with our global network, right? Because there's a team which is actually focusing on what next to take to our clients. You intend to be thought leaders so that you could be demand generators. Because unless you are thought leaders, then you are just selling what is selling already. Okay, you might be able to sell it at scale, but can you be a thought leader so that you can create fresh demand for yourself?
Thank you so much, Sanjeev, for
Yeah.
responding so candidly. Yeah, big round of applause for Sanjeev. Thank you so much. Yeah. Um, so many questions and very nice, concise responses. I am sort of, eager to summarize like we do in the end of the class, but we don't have time to summarize everything. But only one thing that if you were to take away is you said a lot of work needs to be done. Lot of things are unknown, right? And if you just pick up the credit rating agencies, there are n number of credit rating agencies, and all of them have ratings for companies, and you just do a cross tabulation of correlation, you will see that all of them correlate very well, more than 80-90% correlation, which means all of them are measuring similar things. Now do the same thing with ESG numbers, right? You will see that the correlation is below 60%, but the correlation is very high at the both ends. And the companies are very bad, everybody agrees, it's very bad. It's very good, everyone agrees it's very good. MIT Sloan has a project, and it's called Project Aggregate Confusion, because that's what an ESG metric is doing. And thank you, Sanjeev, for acknowledging that a lot of work needs to be done. And the very fact a lot of work needs to be done is the very reason why you have approached IIMA and why we have set up a forum. And in the audience, we also have research scholars. We also have PhD students, and I'm sure some of them would pick up some research projects. Like you said, they're looking forward to cutting edge research to push this conversation forward. We have barely time for maybe like 2 questions from the audience, and questions, as you know, we have more than 2 questions. We'll try to accommodate questions, as we know, have to end in a question mark. Yeah, yeah, right. Please introduce yourself and yeah.
Hi, I'm Piyush. I'm part of the PGP program. So, first question. Currently, a lot of clamor around ESG is from expected from developing countries, but as you know that they have a lot of cycles. There's up cycle, there's down cycle. A lot stable environment is not provided for businesses, due to which is ESG a priority for Indian companies right now. Let's remove the top 500 companies or top 100 companies for that matter. Below that, what are the SMEs or the chunk where 60% of the population is currently working? What is the impact on them, and are they actually working towards it?
So if one is ever looking for a steady state, then we will never be able to do anything on ESG, because there is going to be no steady state. We are looking at a world which is highly fractured. We are looking at a world which is people don't even know whether the world prefers deglobalization, globalization, so on and so forth. So I don't think that we can stop our thinking on ESG just assuming that there will be a steady state or this developing. See, developing and develop debate will continue forever. I think each one of us need to. We have been allowed to make our own progress on timelines, right? But the question is that progress has to be made. As I responded in an earlier question, I mean, to me, why the piece of regulation which has come up on the 1,000 companies is important. It's not the only thing. The only reason that it is important is that when it comes to their reporting, they will willingly have to make sure that their broader ecosystem. Let's assume a world in which there are 100 companies, and you say that only 10 are subject to this regulation, 90 are not, right? Now, those 10 companies cannot do everything all by themselves. How much backward integrated, forward integrated will those be? They will need some others, right? They cannot be living in Mars. So if they actually are interacting with 40 companies out of the balance 90, at least 50 of your companies are now going to have to think this as mainstream, and they will possibly be of the 60. You said 60, the bottom. They will possibly be part of the 60, right? And it will get them to think about it, that if I want to continue to be relevant to them, I need to be thinking about this as well. Otherwise, today it is Piyush, tomorrow it is going to be somebody else who's going to challenge me in the same way. So I think that is how it is important. And the last thing that I would say is that in this broader debate, um, and since I made the point about a globalized and deglobalized world, and since I made the point about a Cadbury and all that, I for one believe that the globalization of the economy, so I'm saying globalization of the economy, will cause will take away this difference between the developed and developing piece, etc. Because in a globalized world where there are, where is the biggest market? The biggest market is in the east of the world. The demand may still be sitting there. More than 50% of the supply is in the east. And if more than 50% of the supply is sitting in the east, we are part of the supply chain of the west. If that is the case, if they have to be compliant, they have to pull us along. Even if we don't want to move, they have to pull us along. So that is my answer to your question.
This carbon tariffs which EU is coming up, the carbon tariff, climate tariff, CBAM, EU is coming up. It's going to directly impact our exporters.
Yeah.
Very soon, I mean, that will be the first constituency we are anticipating would cry for help, and we are sort of hoping to understand what are their requirements. Yes.
Hi, sir. I'm Sumedha. I'm in my first year of the PGP program. My question was relating to ESG metrics, like sir had brought up. It is important to have some sort of quantification or measurement, but ESG at the end of the day is a very qualitative or subjective area. So, does it really make sense to boil it down to a number when the way of measurement for each industry of each company varies a lot? So, to have a standardized number at the end of the day, how relevant would that be?
So, as in many things, and again, Sam, maybe you should add, but in my mind, it's a 80-20 game that, 80% of the matrices will be common, and maybe there are 20% which will be very different. I mean, if you look at somebody who's in the blue economy, right? For them, it may be very, very different as opposed to somebody who's in the core economy, for instance. So I think that 20% could be different. Again, one could say that no, it should not be 80-20, it should be 70-30, whatever. So I would assume that 70% of the things have to be common because they are pivotal and they're foundational to any ESG matrix, etc. And the 30% could be different, which happens even now. And whether you look at credit rating agencies and so on and so forth, etc. Now, at least the shift has been made, particularly now, when in particular when the regulators are training their gun on rating agencies, I can see that there have been shift. And I suppose it would be no different on a ESG rating matrix.
But for industries like cement or thermal power, which are inherently very carbon intensive, the way of measurement or the kind of metrics that we follow for them versus, say, a banking company would be fundamentally very different,
Sure,
right?
sure. No, so you're absolutely right, and that's why I'm saying the 70-30 is going to be the case. As I said, you maybe have it is debatable whether it is 70-30 or it's 80-20, or
Fair enough.
if you're saying cement and financial services 60-40. But see, governance is going to be more or less the same. Social practices possibly a little bit more relevant on one than the other, but will be the same. I think, yes, in each one of them there is going to be some amount of difference. I think the environment quotient is also different. Is also going to be the same at some level. I mean, you look at cloud adoption, for instance. You look at the way, and you look at cloud and you talk about data centers. Now we all keep talking about that. Okay, how much energy does a data center need? Right now, for a financial services provider, it is an equally important question. Somebody is saying that, okay, I'm using thermal electricity for firing or I'm burning coal, but I'm also in here, in my data center, I'm need loads and loads of electricity. So I think there will be, but I acknowledge there will be a certain amount of variations to the piece. But
Thank you,
Sam,
sir.
you might want to add. He's
No, no,
also he was thermal energy expert. Now he's become a.
no. So I think point well made. The only thing is that the parameters are differentiated for industries. That's number one, which means that for financial services, if E weightage is 40%, S is 30, G is 30. For a thermal power plant, E is 55, S is 25, G. So therefore, differentiation is there. Number one. Number two, you said that it is all qualitative. No, it is all quantitative. Qualitative are certain aspects, but if you look at the parameters of E, S, and G, you will have to give quantitative numbers, right? Be it on carbon baseline, the gender diversity, governance, whether you have the 21 policies in place. It's all quantitative. Even if you look at BRSR, and that's where the pressure is coming on corporates. Till the time it was qualitative, they used to write English. As soon as they're saying it is quantitative now, you have to put in those carbon number, water number, governance number. So therefore, that's also there. Third, I think one element before we close is, do understand there's a word you will hear about, materiality. Every industry, because E, S, and G would have 135 components, let's say. For a particular industry, you actually do what we call as materiality, which means out of the 135 all elements, if let's say for argument, whatever, 35, 35, 35, or what is relevant for a mining industry out of E is 15. That's what we do, the first exercise. We bring it down from a 135 common denominator to an industry specific elements. Then we do the quantification. So I think the process is very well laid out. Only thing you can say is there are too many standards, too many things, and India specific is something we need to bring in. That's what we believe. The forum is an effort to do it. Second, I just wanted to also allude to the kind of career opportunities which is emerging. Typically, it starts from reimagining the operating models and supply chain, which is music to your ears because everybody wants to work on strategy, right? Typically, it starts with strategy, looking at the existing strategy of a company through a lens of sustainability, which means there is a strategy which is there. Let's say, again, since we are talking names here, let's take Zomato. Okay, Zomato would say it's a tech company, but is it actually a tech company when you do the materiality? It is not. It might be because the consumer who gets the product from Zomato, you're getting it from a restaurant. So Zomato has to be responsible for the health and safety. You're getting it through a logistics chain from the restaurant down to your place. What's the mobility solution? Whether you're using UV, EV, or a petrol vehicle, what's the carbon? Third, is it a gig worker? You might say, I don't own that gig worker. No. If an accident happens to that gig worker, are you paying for the insurance for that person? Then you receive the content. Is it plastic packed or is it not? Important packaging. How do you dispose it? Whether Zomato today has, as you said, circularity. If Zomato had a model where all the stuff that you got can be circled back, it's a great idea, right? Which means if you are the strategy person engaged with Zomato, all these are sustainable issues. But actually, this is an operating model. Actually, it is how you are interacting with various communities, right? Is that person who is gig worker coming has an insurance, is paid well, and therefore the tips idea came, right? Are you giving so that he makes that money there? So therefore, don't look at sustainability as a CSR activity or something which is climate. It is in operating models. It is in supply chains. It is in social impact you create. We did a work for one of the Meta companies. Only report he took to the Prime Minister is the social impact that that company was making in India. So primary surveys of traders, consumers, cost of capital, license to operate, all those issues. So which I'm saying is it's all strategy, operating model, supply chains, governance, social impact. So it's all stuff that you guys do and interested in, right? So don't look at it as a Jhulawala NGO kind of a work. Yes, they're important, but it is more for you.
Uh,
Thank you.
really interesting to know that. Thank you so much. They took the social impact to Prime Minister's office. We are keen to know which report they took to the shareholders. And that is what. So, again, in the interest of time, we will have to wind up. I would request our executive committee member of the center, Professor Abhiman Das, to hand over a token of appreciation from the center to remove the. Thank you. You're most
Thank you.
Sambitosh, we have something for you also. But I know you are eager to share the dais with the chair. Abhiman, please, please. Sambitosh, just we can just hand over. It's the same thing, we don't want to expose our plastic footprints, so we just keep it covered. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Joseph, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Soumya, please. Yeah. Yeah. Sanjeev, please come in the. Thank you so much. Would you like to say a couple of words to your students as a PGP?
Not as a PGP chair per se, but I thought I'll say one thing. I have seen with my limited exposure to this area, the internal control about the entire framework turns out to be one of the most complicated part to implement. How do you go about it? It's not a question, but is there a standard template on different set of industries that can be implemented to have more control on this particular component, internal control?
You mean on the governance side
Yes,
only, or
it's on the governance side. Yeah.
most certainly? Most certainly nowadays, thankfully there are a lot of templates which exist, etc. And you can customize those templates. In fact, that's core of the work that we do. And when you talk about governance, when you talk about the control environment, how can if you look at the broader internal audit function as it used to exist earlier, today it is all about controls and processes. And that actually becomes an input to the external auditor as well. And of course, enables people to respond to various regulators and others about their own control systems. Let me also say that today, and since we're talking about it, those controls and processes become so important that any external person, there are reams and reams of data. That number of transactions have gone up many-fold. As much IT you might use, unless you can review 80% of the transactions, you will never be able to get comfort. And hence this control testing work, which actually do the testing there is almost anywhere between 40 to 70%. Unless you use this as an input, you will not be able to provide assurance to your shareholders or stakeholders. So there are templates, absolutely, and which are sector specific. Of course, they need to be customized depending on the nature of the business, etc. But they're pretty much there.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. So, Sanjeev, what you just had was kind of a simulated version of a classroom.
Right.
In the prof would be in the spotlight, and people will be far more ferocious. That's the only difference. There is also one more element of the classroom. When we finish the course, usually we take a picture with the prof in the end, everyone.
Right.
So we'll do that.
Sure.
Right.
I'd love to.
And before we sort of move to the final thing, would like to thank people who behind the scene actually make the event happen.